I would say I was really a bit of a workaholic, and what came with that was a lot of self-deceit and denial about how good were things really. Deep down, I wasn't pursuing things that were really in true alignment with my most authentic self. And we like to say nobody ever got triggered by a fact, but it's the stories we make up about the facts that get us activated. And it's those stories that our ego is like wants to be right about. To take 100% responsibility, one has to end all blame and criticism. One has to let go of their victim story.
We have to lean in more to humanity, to become more human and to connect with ourselves and connect with the wisdoms that we carry in ourselves, that we, through distraction and focused on the outside world, is actually getting us further and further away from being human.
Leadership teams are waking up to that the inner work is intricately tied to high performance.
Today, I'm talking to Jim Fallon, who has experienced two distinct leadership chapters for over 25 years. He led companies in software, consulting, biotech, and manufacturing. On traditional terms, he was a success. After significant challenges, he stepped away, spent a year with his kids, deepened his mindfulness and embodiment practices, and started coaching. Now he's a managing partner at Conscious Leadership Group. Welcome, Jim.
Thanks, Steven. It's fun to be here with you.
So I wanted to start by talking a little bit about your journey. And when you think back to your executive years, what was the first signals that the way you were living wasn't really sustainable anymore?
Well, there's probably two categories. There's the first signals that I was aware of, which came much later than probably what the first signals were in actuality, because I would say I was really a bit of a workaholic, and what came with that was a lot of self-deceit and denial about how good were things really. But what I wasn't really admitting to myself was that I was under a lot of stress, and my relationships, both personal and professional, weren't great. And I didn't actually have a great model for what those relationships could have looked like. I was just really doing the best I could and really putting a positive spin on it for myself. It was in my last business that I really started to feel distant from my business partners. The company was starting to generate quite a lot of cash, and I found myself feeling vulnerable to being squeezed out. And my energy levels were dropping. Partnership, my marriage wasn't great. We were in therapy, working on some things. And I started to feel like, wow, things are not going as well as I thought they could.
Yeah. And then what did you do?
In 2015, I had this 3-day experience where on a Wednesday morning, I got some biopsy results and found out that I had prostate cancer. And then on Thursday morning, I found out I had Lyme disease. And on Friday afternoon, my left retina detached. And so for me, this was at the time shocking and stressful and the like. And from where I sit today, I can see the universe it kind of had enough and wanted to give me a wake up call so I could really face some of the things that I hadn't been facing.
Yeah, isn't that funny how this always happens? Every single person that I coach, every single person on the podcast had those moments. And if we don't listen to the signals, then the universe, I guess, continues to tell us and gives us harder and harder challenges because we're not listening. And at some
It's true.
point, as they say in AA, you hit rock bottom, and then you actually make the changes that you should have probably made many, many years ago.
Yeah.
Is that how it felt for you?
Yeah. And you mentioned AA. I mean, actually, I was saying there were signals earlier on that I wasn't paying attention to and wasn't aware of at the time. There was a decent stretch in the midst of that career where I was drinking a lot of drugs, and really burning the candle at both ends. So
Yeah.
running businesses, but then also, living a pretty aggressive lifestyle, which I'm sure wasn't good for my body and led to, some of the challenges that I had later. But if there were some moments that I maybe didn't pay attention to, it would have been that behavior and what it meant, rather than sort of waking up to it when the signal was a little quieter than it ended up being. I just told myself a story that I could handle it. And that's how I was running for quite a while.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think that that also is a very common thread across very successful people, that we end up self-medicating
Hmm.
because the stress is so hard or so heavy, and both the external, but probably more even the internal stress is so heavy. And the only way that we can deal with it is through disassociation.
Yeah, I think deep down, I wasn't pursuing things that were really in true alignment with my most authentic self. And so I was also, not self-aware enough to see how I was creating less than ideal relationships, how I was creating a less environment around me. And then, I think alcohol and drugs were an escape from maybe turning and facing that. And so, addiction in the middle of my career is definitely a part of the story.
Yeah. And then so you end up slowing down, and you took some time off
Mhm.
to take care of yourself, but also take care of your family. What then emerged
Yeah.
inside of you when you did that?
Yeah. So after that, that 3-day stretch, one of the amazing things about a detached retina is one of the things that you do to recover from it is you have to head position. You have to look straight down for several weeks without moving. Like I literally had to stop moving, not answer emails, not do anything, and meanwhile contemplate a cancer diagnosis. So for somebody who was moving very fast and relatively unconscious, it was pretty shocking to the system.
Sure.
And it was within 6 months of that experience that I had exited my business completely and committed to taking a year off. So this allowed my wife at the time to go back to work. And I had kids, sort of 10 and 8 years old, and I became stay-at-home dad with them. And so this is 2016. It started on January 1. And so my plan was to go back to work a year later, and I just got to spend so much time with them. I would have regarded myself as a good father and present with my kids up to that point. But then again, I wasn't seeing myself clearly yet. And so that year with them was just a real transformational experience. Learning what it meant to be really in tune with both of them was such a gift. I took some time to study emotional intelligence and mindfulness, and I had a meditation practice, and I really, doubled down on that, reading all the literature about how good diet, exercise, and meditation is good for your health. And since I was on a health journey, I was doing all those things. So I was really tending to myself and tending to those innermost relationships over that period of time. And it was around the end of that year that Diana Chapman sent me a coaching client. This had been in October. And I literally called her and said, "Hey, I think you sent this email to the wrong person." And she said, "No, read it. Read what she wrote. I think you could be really helpful." And I had this moment. I read it and I thought, I could totally be helpful here. And this would be fun. And it was like, this endorphins washed over me, and I felt this, like, had this moment, kind of an epiphany, like, oh my gosh, that would be fun. And like, for maybe the first time ever, I thought work could be fun. And so it was my first true signal that I was starting to get into alignment with what I was going to be doing and how I was going to be expressing myself in the world. And so the next day I was researching coaching programs, and within a week I had signed up for a year-long program that started after the new year. So I had committed to taking a second year off. And halfway through that program in 2017, I started to get clients, and I was off to the races in a whole new direction.
Isn't it amazing when you start slowing down that you realize two things? So I went through a similar moment where I had sold my company and I wanted to take some time off to really think about what was going to be next. And it took me probably about 2 months to feel relaxed. I didn't even know how much stress I had until I had
Hmm.
no responsibility or no work responsibility. But then
Hmm.
also at the same time, I didn't even know what being present felt like. I thought I was always present with my children and my family, but when you're running around all day long and you have, hundreds or thousands of employees who come to you every day with with problems, the last thing that you can be at home is truly present. Maybe there are some, but like I definitely couldn't do it.
Yeah,
Um,
it's so true. I remember in that in that first year off, I would sit out under this tree in this lawn chair and I would meditate. And I remember I had this incredibly relaxing exhale and I had the thought, it even brought tears to my eyes. I had the thought, oh my God, I think that's the first complete exhale I've had in 20 years. So it was the better part of 4 months after stopping the constricted, do. Like really, my nervous system was tightly wound. And so it did. It was like you said, it took months for it to unwind to where I could be in a more relaxed state. And that was just the beginning of so much
yeah,
healing and so much work.
it is really amazing how the nervous system just holds so much, and we don't recognize how ineffective we actually become because we're white knuckling it the whole time, and then when we let
Mm.
go, how much more creative we can be, how much more present we can be, how actually we could be more effective at doing things. But in so many ways, I think people feel like this letting go means that they're going to be lazy or complacent, and in reality it's the opposite.
Yeah, that's my experience.
So having lived the 15 commitments from both sides as a coach, but also, as a leader, which one challenged you the most early on?
I mean, the most challenging one for me was commitment 3, which is feeling your feelings all the way through to completion. And so, the idea is that um, if we're not allowing our emotions, which is to rise in and on the body moment to moment as we're going through life, if we're not tuned into that, a couple of things are happening. One is we're holding them in, so they're getting caught in the nervous system. And this thing that we talked about earlier about nervous system holding on to things, it accumulates over time. And so then our bodies become these, places where all this energy is stored in unhelpful ways. So that's one thing that happens. The other thing that happens, we miss out on all the wisdom that the emotions are bringing to us. So fear might be arising to say, hey, wake up, you're not seeing something clearly here. Or
Mhm.
sadness might be arising to say, hey, there's something here that needs to be let go of, something that needs to be grieved so you can be available for the next thing that wants to get created. And so if we're not tuned into those emotions, then we're missing all these opportunities, all this wisdom that's rising through our body. And over the course of my life, and like many people, I grew up in a household where don't cry, don't be sad, don't be angry. And so there was always this sort of training to not feel my feelings, which I think is so common in our society. And so many of my clients report having had similar experiences. And so by the time I found this work in my 40s, I had gotten really, really good at not feeling my feelings.
Yeah.
So when I'm sitting in one of these forums and circles where people are saying, where do you feel that in your body? I literally couldn't locate anything. And so it was a real challenge and took a lot of patience for me to begin to feel things and then begin to allow emotions to flow and then to begin to unwind a lot of the things that I had stored up over time. And it's just been an incredible journey and so fruitful.
Yeah, that's a incredible important part of really connecting with yourself to be to be in your body and not just be in your head all the time, which in our society, everything that is valued is from here up.
The research shows that the more we're able to feel our feelings, the more we're going to have executive presence, the more that people are going to be willing to follow us. It's like humans have a little bit of a spidey sense. They're able to, like, if you're telling me you're not mad, but you really are, there's a part of me that kind of knows that. And the
Mhm,
part of me that knows that then is kind of like not sure if I should trust you or not, because it looks like you're mad, but you're saying you're not mad.
mhm,
It looks like you're sad, but you're saying you're not sad. And, as much as people want to hear from their leaders all the positive things and all of the directions, and they also want to trust them. And at some very human or maybe even mammalian level, we really trust the people whose energy matches their words. And
mhm.
so if you're mad and I experience you as mad, you're actually building trust with me. So there's a real strong argument for leaders getting good at feeling their feelings and being able to express them in healthy ways, including anger, fear, and sadness, so that they can be trusted, so that people don't have to guess what's going on inside. So, I spend a lot of the time I spend with leaders is on this commitment, probably because it was the most challenging for me. I feel I have a lot to explore with people on that front.
Yeah. And I think it's specifically challenging for men, right? As you said, when we were kids, we were not allowed to be sad. We were not allowed to feel our feelings. I, at least, default a lot to anger because that was sort of very male to be able to do. And even though not pleasant, but more acceptable than being sad or fearful.
Mhm.
Do you see that? Do you see a difference when you're coaching men and women in regards to their feelings?
I think that, there is like a male persona that many of us feel like we have to live up to, which is not helpful. But then, I work with a lot of women and, their experience is it's okay for them to express sadness, but not anger. And
Like
so they'll often have those two coupled together where when they're mad, some sadness comes up and they don't feel congruent. And so it's also a cultural and societal issue on both polarities, the masculine and the feminine. Um, so the practice of feeling our feelings all the way through to completion and sort of seeing the ways in which we've been, our neural programming has got us right where we are today is the starting point for, becoming more somatically informed and emotionally intelligent.
Talk to me about the full responsibility and how did that change how you related to your marriage, your business partners, or even yourself?
So this was one of the other ones that was going through my mind when you asked me which was the most challenging, because this one wasn't necessarily the most challenging one to put into practice the way that feeling your feelings was for me, but it was challenging in that basically to take 100% responsibility, one has to end all blame and criticism. One has to let go of their victim story. So I could say that the causes and conditions of like why things weren't going well for me in my business relationship, I could blame that other person. I could be at the effect of that. I could live in victimhood, which feels really good because then it's not my fault.
Yeah.
But when I get challenged to like, how am I creating a business partner relationship that's not serving me? And what are the ways in which I'm the creator of that? I'm taking responsibility for that. For anything that I saw that was, what I considered to be a problem in my marriage, the exercise is teach me a class on how to have an unhappy marriage. Teach me how you're doing it, Jim. And so then I would say, well, here's the things that I'm doing to create an unhappy marriage for myself. So I can no longer blame the other person and no longer be able to be a victim to what's happening outside me. So it's challenging in a different way. It means really owning my part in all of my life. Not just the parts that are going well, but also owning that I'm creating the parts that aren't going well.
Yeah.
This is
I
a
really
courageous and radical move.
that really resonated with me when I read the book and also really thinking about that I'm responsible for my own happiness and so is my partner, and I need to hold my partner accountable to be responsible for her own happiness as well as I need to be responsible for my own happiness.
Yeah, we take 100% responsibility, not 110 and not 90, not 101 and not 99.
Yeah. What other of the commitments do you think specifically high achieving leaders struggle with that you find most impactful? And of course, all of them are important, and I read them multiple times, but maybe there are a few other ones that we can mention.
Yep. Well, I would say, so the first one is taking responsibility. The second one is curiosity. Curiosity seems like it would be an easy one because who isn't curious? But the way we like to hold it is that curiosity requires that you let go of righteousness. So where is it you feel that you're right and the other party or people are wrong? And are you willing to let go of holding your story as being true or more true than other people's stories? And are you willing to hold the opposing view as being equally true, as true or truer than the story that you've been holding? So it actually does require real kind of inner stability to sort of embody what curiosity really means. I think so many people would say that they're curious people because they're interested in lots of different things, but they're not willing to question their stories at the level of depth that really unlocks their creativity and the creativity of their organizations.
How does that relate to the ego? Because I feel like, whenever somebody's challenging me, and I feel really uncomfortable, and my inclination is to lash out or to
Yeah.
disagree. Now, because I'm practicing a bit very hard and it's still very challenging, I try to feel what's happening and try to exactly be curious about what they're saying and say, what would be like if that person actually is true, is right, and what
Hmm.
can I learn from that experience? But talk to me a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, anytime we get reactive, it's all about the ego, right? It's like we use this model above the line and below the line. When you're above the line, you're in presence, you're open, you're curious, you're sort of receiving the world as it's here for your learning. And when you're below the line, you're kind of constricted. There's some reactivity, you're in some blame or criticism. And so anytime that you feel some reactivity, like you're pointing to, like somebody's saying something and you're feeling defensive about it or wanting to lash out, like you said, yeah, your ego got scared. Like you're holding a story that you believe and it's somehow related to your identity. So we like to say that there's facts and there's stories. The facts are what a video camera would record and nobody would disagree. And then anything else is a story. Like, I have cancer. That's a fact. That's bad. That's not good to have cancer. Those are all stories.
Mhm.
And we like to say nobody ever got triggered by a fact, but it's the stories we make up about the facts that get us activated. And it's those stories that our ego is like wants to be right about. And so you nailed it. It's like facing our own egoic nature is really what's happening in this curiosity one. That's why I say it's kind of a little bit of a sleeper, but it's the second one for a reason. It's like, are you really willing to question all your stories? Are you really willing to question all your beliefs in service of awakening, in service of your own creativity, your highest potential?
Yeah, very, very powerful. So you work with a lot of Silicon Valley leaders, and many of them are very successful. What themes do you see emerge around burnout, identity, and also pace today? Because time is accelerating, and pressures are accelerating.
I mean, the pace of technological change is kind of astounding as it's unfolding right now. So the conditions for maybe handling it the way that I handled it, which was not super conscious, are all here. One of the things that I work on leaders with around this particular issue is with things changing so quickly all the time, there's a lot of uncertainty. There can be a lot of fear. And this fear kind of like it's in the body. Now, it's important to feel that so you can get the wisdom, as we were talking about earlier. And it's really important to not live in a constant state of fear. So one of the observations I have, like in the current environment, is how can we train our nervous systems and our awareness such that we can really be tuning into all the uncertainty that our business faces, that organizations face, while simultaneously unplugging from that fear so we don't stay in a constant elevated state of stress. But we actually experience the stress that's here so we can have the insights and the wisdom that we need to move organizations forward and pivot. Lots of pivots required in this particular period of time, and give our bodies the opportunity to rest and restore so that we do have energy to run a longer race than a sprint. It's almost like a new skill that includes some of this emotional intelligence.
Yeah, I think that one is a very, very hard one. It's hard for me too. I'm at the point where I can recognize it and I can rationalize it, but the fear still creeps into the body.
And so the practice is, can you locate it, unhook from mental activity, allow it to be in the body as much as it really is.
Yeah.
Breathe with it for a moment. It's like the mind is having one experience and the body is not catching up quickly enough to be in sync with the mind.
Yeah.
So we bring our awareness into the body, and it brings body and mind back into synchrony. And it's in those moments that we can find some of the wisdom that this moment is here for us. But it does require willingness to feel it, willingness to sit with it.
I find that meditation is very helpful in that, because I always pride myself of being an intellectual person to be able to rationalize things, think things through. But when you're able to do things like meditation or some of the somatic practices that you just described, it's actually rewiring maybe our circuitry so that we actually are more in our bodies. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, the work goes actually quite deep beyond even just these somatic practices of giving our whole nervous systems new experiences to rewire so we can change. Like we have a lot of automated behaviors that we move through with life that are just based on our childhood patterning and things that we learned over the course of our lives.
Yeah.
And so in consciousness coaching, we're really trying to make these unconscious behaviors conscious. We're trying to become aware of them so we
Mhm.
can be with them. And a lot of it lives in the nervous system. And so, yeah, we do put attention on it in that way. So over time, our automated behaviors are more aligned with our authentic self in ways we want to be in the world and are less of the shadowy parts that are just natural for all of us to have.
Yeah.
The parts of us that want to defend, the parts of us that want to fix things for others, the parts of us that want to lash out occasionally. Meditation is very helpful. What I like to say about meditation is I mean, you might meditate in the morning and have you calm yourself down and have a peaceful experience. Some days that's the case. Some days that's not. A lot of people think that's what meditation is for. And I'd say, yes, it can be. And that's not really why I ask my clients to meditate. The reason I ask my clients to meditate is because you're training your awareness. So here I am, we're coaching together and we're having insights. And I'm saying, okay, now in between sessions, Steven, I want you to be paying attention for whenever this thing happens and you'll notice it. And when you notice it, you'll have a different choice. And when you make the different choice, you're actually rewiring yourself for future behavioral change. Well, in order for you to have the muscles, the neurology to track yourself in that way, you need to train it. So what meditation does, you follow your breath. So you're following the breath. And then at some point, your mind wanders off to something else. And then at some later point, you notice your mind has wandered. So now you notice your mind has been wandering. And in that noticing, because this is what you're doing, you're training your mind to be good at noticing. And then you redirect to the breath. So these are like the two muscles, the noticing muscle of what's going on in your awareness, and then the redirection muscle. So you sit for 10 or 20 minutes a day meditating. You're training yourself to be better at life, to be better at tracking your own behaviors in real time so you have better choices. You can make better choices in the moment. That's the real goal of meditation, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
I 100% agree. My dad taught me how to meditate when I was in my teens, and it was the way I was meditating was very much of a relaxation meditation. And so I meditated, between 10 to 30 minutes a day. And then I got on my bike and went to work or went to school or whatever it was. Somebody cut me off and I showed them my finger because the anger immediately came out and the meditation practice was gone. And then about, let's say 10 some years ago, I started practicing non-dual meditation where a lot of the practices really, is about teaching you that there is actually not this person inside of you that is controlling what you're doing, but there's actually just experience. And once I started doing that, exactly what you're describing started happening, where it is no longer about the meditation, but actually it's about rewiring myself so that when I am in the world,
Mm-hmm.
I have more moments of clarity. Of course, very few of us, at least not me, are capable of doing this all the time. But it just buys you the split second where when somebody cuts you off, to be able to recognize that that's what's happening and that you're not then captured by that thought and
Yep.
react to it. And so hopefully that helps us to be a little bit better every day.
Percent. I mean, I'll just go back to this idea of being above the line and below the line. Open in presence, moving along in the world, and then something happens and I'm below the line. We don't
Mhm.
actually control if we go below the line in the moment. We just get into reactivity. But by practicing in the way that we do, including meditation, over time, we'll find we go below the line less often. We don't stay there as long. We don't go as frequently. So it's just an emergent property of being a more conscious person moving through the world.
Yeah. So we talked about some things that maybe for some people seem quite esoteric, right? Somatic practices, emotional intelligence, internal work. How does that relate to leadership? Why is this becoming more mainstream today?
I mean, I think the research has shown for a long time that emotional intelligence is central to higher quality leadership. I think that different modalities like somatic experiencing and internal family systems that have been around for a long time, psychedelic therapies, have become more mainstream in the last, say, 5 to 10 years, and certainly more so very recently. So a lot of these things are part of the conversation now. And I think it's just because people are becoming more aware of how important it is to sort of understand ourselves in order to have high quality relationships and be the most authentic expression of what we have to offer in the world. Now, how does that work with teams? So at Conscious Leadership Group, we do this thing called a Conscious Culture Program, which is sort of a 9-month deep dive with an executive team. And so we're going through the commitments and we're doing a lot of these practices with a sort of a CEO and their executive team. And over time, what really happens is, we got lots of different benefits, but one of the key benefits is that it becomes a much higher feedback-rich environment. So what basically happens is people are getting to know themselves better, they're learning to feel their feelings, they're taking responsibility, they're no longer blaming or criticizing, they're learning candor, making clear agreements, all these things that we practice. But ultimately what they're doing is they're relaxing their ego. And so they're not taking what the other person says as personally, and they're doing this in relationship with other people that are having the same experience. So now that I know you're not going to take something I say as personally as you might have otherwise, your ego defenses are sort of, you're more aware of them now and you're not so likely to be reactive. I'm more willing to say more challenging things to you. And you have the ability to say more challenging things to me. So now this team is sort of getting all their wisdom out on the table, and they're all being invited in to participate at a higher level of function. And so I would say that leadership teams are waking up to that the inner work is intricately tied to high performance. And in particular, in this way of creating a very high feedback, non-reactive environment is one of the things that we really like playing with our clients.
What do you think the impact on AI on leadership will be, and maybe then broader on the workplace?
Over the next several years, implementing everything that the current AI has as a potential is going to transform businesses. So there is a disruptive force. It's going to affect jobs. There may be some new jobs created. The horizon of which, over human history, we've had a hard time seeing what all the new job creations from disruptive technologies were going to be, but they always seem to be there. So I could see that as being possible. But if it continues to get smarter and smarter at the same kind of pace that it has been, then I have a hard time imagining what life is going to be like. I think it'd be very disruptive. And there might be in the utopian view, I hope we use it to solve hunger, shelter, housing, medical, water for everybody on the globe. And I hope we don't move towards a more dystopian view that, some people believe we might be headed towards. But even if the utopian version comes to pass, it means a restructuring of society. And so even in that, there's going to be just massive amount of fear for us to be working through and processing, even in the utopian scenario, I believe. So over at CLG, we're putting attention on bringing people together in person, because if AI does disrupt all the jobs or a bunch of the jobs, getting together in person is going to be one of the things that we have more time to do, and will be a uniquely human thing to be doing. So we're setting ourselves up.
I definitely believe that no matter what happens, we have to lean in more to humanity. And that's a lot of the work that you and I are doing is helping us all to become more human and to connect with ourselves and connect with the wisdoms that we carry in ourselves, that we, through distraction and through focused on the outside world, is actually getting us further and further away from being human. And so hopefully there is this momentum that is starting where there are more people that are craving these in-person interactions, these more humane interactions, these more loving interactions with each other, rather than focusing on the outside and more and less for the human.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So my last question for you is, and I started to ask this to a lot of my guests, is if you could give your 25-year-old self advice, what would it be?
I would just encourage him to take a really close look at his addictive patterns. I would encourage him to be more vulnerable in asking for help. There's no shame in asking people for support. I would let him know that there's stuff in you that you probably need to look at, and I would encourage you to start looking at it.
Yeah. And now let's fast forward. If your 85-year-old self could give the current Jim advice, what do you think that would be?
Keep standing for exquisiteness in all your relationships. Be willing to say the vulnerable things. Be willing to hold yourself, take responsibility for however anything is showing up that isn't exactly the way you want it, knowing your part in it, and be in communication about it with all the people that you love. Yeah. Yeah, be willing to share yourself more fully.
Jim, thank you so much for your time. This was,
Thank you.
I enjoyed it. I learned from it. I'm sure my listeners are going to get a lot of great insights from it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Really, really had a good time chatting with you.